Chapter 21 Arriving at Taixuan Sword Academy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The journey to reach Jinlan City is still very difficult, however, because of the earthly monsters. There was no danger along the way. The ground-suppressing rhinoceros is comparable to the speed of Dowling's sixth realm, which is enough to get rid of most troubles. At noon 2 days later, everyone arrived at Jinlan City. A huge city wall with a height of meters stands on the ground, giving people a feeling of being insurmountable. Behind this city wall is the prosperous Jinlan City. Outside the city wall, there are many gathering places. The residents in these gathering areas are mostly refugees who have fled here and have no fixed residence. Only outside Jinlan City can you barely get shelter, so that you don't even have a place to stay. This world is full of dangers. Any first-level slave monster can kill an ordinary person. Compared with these displaced refugees who have fled here, the treatment of villagers like Xiaoling is much better. At least, there is a school in the village that can provide some guidance on spiritual practice. In a place where refugees gather, becoming a warrior can only rely on luck. The place where these people originally lived has been destroyed by monsters, Wan Linhai said. About 3 months ago, there was a general-level beast king in the south. General level, but when Xiaoling heard this word, he couldn't help but take a breath. Warcraft also has strengths and weaknesses. The lowest level of monsters is the slave level, which corresponds to the Tongmai realm. On top of this, there are elite-level monsters, corresponding to the human Taoist realm, and above this is the general level, which corresponds to the soul state of the human race. The Dao spirit realm is already out of reach for Xiaoling now, not to mention the general-level monsters that are comparable to those in the soul realm. Then, did Jinlan City send anyone to kill that general-level monster? Xiaoling asked curiously. Wan Linhai shook his head, then changed the topic. At the beginning of next spring, Taixuan Sword Academy and Nandu Academy will each select 10 disciples from these refugees. This can be regarded as Jinlan City's compensation for these refugees. Xiaoling nodded, looking at the refugees outside the city wall. I couldn't help clenching my fists. In this world, the existence of human race is indeed very small. 2 rhinoceroses came to the city gate and attracted the attention of many refugees. The closed city gate slowly opened a small crack, just enough for 2 people to pass through. Several heavily armed soldiers walked in, all holding firearms in their hands. He was fully vigilant against the surrounding refugees to prevent them from taking the opportunity to sneak into Jinlan City. We are disciples of Taixuan Sword Academy. Senior Sister Song jumped off the Jinli Rhino, took out the Taixuan Sword Academy's token, and said. One of them took the token, checked its authenticity, and returned it to Senior Sister Song, shouting at the same time, "Open the door." Then, the heavy city gate slowly opened. Senior Sister Song jumped onto Jinli Rhino again. It wasn't until the city gate was opened that the 2 ground-holding rhinos slowly walked in. Earth monsters cannot run around unscrupulously in Jinlan City. Speed limit. Not only that, each Earth monster has its own number. During certain specific periods, some earthly warcraft cannot be ridden due to restrictions. Moreover, Jinlan City also has a set of traffic rules that belong to the earthly monsters. If there are too many violations, the demonic beast control certificate will even be revoked. That's right, you also need documents if you want to control warcraft. As the 2 ground-suppressing rhinos entered Jinlan City, a group of refugees outside also made a fuss, and then rushed towards the city gate. Bang bang bang. A series of gunshots rang out. Xiaoling hurriedly turned around and saw that rows of refugees had fallen to the ground. This? Xiaoling was so surprised that he was speechless. Xiaoling, who was born in Haitang in his previous life, had never seen soldiers shooting recklessly. Don't worry, it's just a tranquilizer gun. It will only make those refugees sleep for a while. Wan Linhai opened his mouth and said. Now is no different than before. The resources in Jinlan City are also tight. If those refugees sneak in, there will definitely be chaos. Xiaoling nodded and said no more. Wow, are those cars? I used to only see pictures in books. Zhang Xiaonan, who was on the other rhinoceros, let out an exclamation. Xiaoling followed her gaze and found that it was a dilapidated Wuling Hongguang van. Cars can be driven in the city, but it is not possible to drive outside the city. because there are no paved roads outside the city. Today's cars are mostly toys for wealthy students. I've never seen the world. It's so shameful. Li Changkong snorted softly and said, hearing this, Qiu Lingfeng frowned a little uncomfortable, but finally relaxed. After all, he and Zhang Xiaonan are both here to practice, so it's better not to cause trouble, and Zhang Xiaonan didn't hear it either, so he just pretended he didn't hear it. Taixuan Sword Academy covers an area of acres and is divided into two areas. The inner courtyard and the outer courtyard. The number of disciples in the outer courtyard alone is nearly In comparison, the number of disciples in the inner courtyard is much smaller, with less than 1,000. Wan Linhai and others also fulfilled their duties and took Qiu Lingfeng and Zhang Xiaonan to the disciple registration office. The two registered their information and received the clothes of the disciples from the outer courtyard of Taixuan Sword Academy. Other new disciples will arrive at Taixuan Sword Academy tomorrow. You can take a good rest today. Zi Xiaoling said. If there's anything you two don't understand, just come to me. Okay, senior sister Xiaoling. Qiu Lingfeng nodded. Okay, no more words, we have to go back to recover. Zi Xiaoling smiled and said, then he left with senior sister Song and others. Where is your dormitory? Qiu Lingfeng glanced at Zhang Xiaonan and asked. Building Bingjiu. Zhang Xiaonan said. It's the worst level, what about you? It's also building Bingjiu. Qiu Lingfeng shrugged. Why? Zhang Xiaonan suddenly said dissatisfied. What's wrong? Qiu Lingfeng looked at Zhang Xiaonan puzzled. You have clearly awakened your magical talent, why are you still in the same building as me? Zhang Xiaonan frowned and said. Hehe, this shows that your talent is not bad. Qiu Lingfeng smiled and said. No, I have to go find out. Zhang Xiaonan wanted to seek justice for Qiu Lingfeng, and as he spoke, he wanted to go back. Forget it, we are in the same building, so we can take care of anything. Qiu Lingfeng stopped Zhang Xiaonan and said. Since you don't care, forget it. Zhang Xiaonan glanced at Qiu Lingfeng and sighed, then, the two of them walked towards the dormitory building. On the way, Zhang Xiaonan looked east and west, feeling novel about everything, looking forward to the next 4 years of training in Taixuan Sword Academy. Qiu Lingfeng didn't feel much, it's just that Jinlan City has a somewhat modern atmosphere. Chapter 22 Cultivation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Bingjiu Dormitory is divided into east and west sides, respectively for male and female disciples. After leaving downstairs in the dormitory, Qiu Lingfeng received the dormitory key from the dormitory ant. The management of Taixuan Sword Academy is different from what I imagined. Qiu Lingfeng held the key to the dormitory and looked at the building full of earth. The scene in Jinlan City is completely different from the desolation outside, completely belong to two worlds. If he didn't say anything, Qiu Lingfeng would even have the illusion of being on the earth. Tomorrow is the day when the remaining new disciples will be admitted to the hospital, so Qiu Lingfeng can get used to Taixuan Sword Academy one day in advance. Beep beep. At this time, the communication watch on Qiu Lingfeng's left wrist suddenly made a sound. This communication watch is uniformly equipped by Taixuan Sword Academy for new disciples. It only has the simplest communication function and can only be used in Jinlan City. Communication watches with higher-level functions need to be purchased by students themselves. Qiu Lingfeng raised her hand and glanced. It was a message from Zhang Xiaonan, saying that she had found the dormitory and asked Qiu Lingfeng if she wanted to buy some daily necessities together. Qiu Lingfeng doesn't need to buy any daily necessities, his portable space is already prepared, but he couldn't let Zhang Xiaonan go alone. After finding the dormitory, Qiu Lingfeng accompanied Zhang Xiaonan to go shopping. What is used in Taixuan Sword Academy is not currency, but points. There are points in the communication watch, which are distributed together with the communication watch. New disciples can get 500 points. If you want to get points in the future, you have to work hard on your own, and there are many ways to get points. Downstairs in the dormitory, Zhang Xiaonan was already waiting there. Let's finish our meal first and then buy something. Zhang Xiaonan looked at Qiu Lingfeng and said. Qiu Lingfeng glanced at the sky, and it was now completely dark. There are already street lights outside. Ah. Qiu Lingfeng nodded. After eating, Xiao Lingfeng bought a bunch of things with Zhang Xiaonan. Her points were directly spent. After returning to his dormitory, Xiao Lingfeng began to practice Tongmai boxing. The spiritual energy in Taixuan Sword Academy is twice as rich as that in Xingshou village. And this also doubled Xiao Lingfeng's practice speed. With the blessing of the 8th section Tongmai fist, Xiao Lingfeng's 5th main meridian was directly penetrated that night. The strength increased by another 200 kilograms, reaching 1,000 kilograms. By penetrating the 3 main meridians, I will be a warrior at the 8th level of Tongmai realm. Xiao Lingfeng clenched his fists and said excitedly. When he traveled through time, he only had half a month to spare. In half a month, he went from having no cultivation to a 5th level martial artist in Tongmai realm. Such a terrifying improvement is something that no one else would even dare to think of. Looking at the time, it was already past 3 o'clock in the middle of the night. I completely forgot about the time. After taking a bath, Xiao Lingfeng fell down tiredly and fell asleep. Early the next morning, Xiao Lingfeng got up from bed and started doing Tongmai boxing again. Xiao Lingfeng didn't stop until he was covered in sweat again and his hungry stomach growled. After walking out of the dormitory, Xiao Lingfeng saw new disciples entering the dormitory building one after another. After eating, Xiao Lingfeng returned to the dormitory and saw 3 more roommates, a young man with fair complexion and fine clothes, and 2 other young men with dark skin, one with a strong build and the other with a slim figure. "Are you our last roommate?" The thin young man looked at Xiao Lingfeng and asked. "Well, my name is Xiao Lingfeng." Xiao Lingfeng nodded. "My name is Hao Xiao. I come from the village. My cultivation level is the 4th level of Tongmai realm." The thin young man stretched out a hand and said. "Yi Yucheng, from the village, 5th level of Tongmai realm." The fair young man glanced at Xiao Lingfeng and said. "My name is Zhao Bai, I am also from the village and I am in the 4th level of Tongmai realm." The muscular young man chuckled and said. Xiao Lingfeng shook Hao Xiao's hand and said. "I am also from the village, and I am also in the 5th level of Tongmai realm." "Isn't it? Are you from the village too?" Hao Xiao scratched his head and said in confusion. "I heard from Aunt that you came yesterday." Xiao Lingfeng shrugged and said. "I just came earlier. Besides, the people in Jinlan city have been practicing since they were young. At our age, their cultivation level is much higher than ours." "That's true." Hao Xiao laughed and said. "We are in the same class, right?" Xiao Lingfeng asked again. "Since they are all from the village, they can't be wrong," Hao Xiao said. "By the way, I heard that there are quite a few people with magical talents in this village. I don't know what they are like." Xiao Lingfeng shrugged and said. "Who knows?" After that, Hao Xiao and others went to eat. Because Xiao Lingfeng had eaten, he stayed in the dormitory. Then, Xiao Lingfeng continued to use Tongmai fist. It didn't take long for Hao Xiao and others to come back. When they saw Xiao Lingfeng opening the pulse fist in the dormitory, they couldn't help but be speechless. "I said, Ling Feng, why are you practicing boxing in the dormitory? There is a junior training room in the academy. You can practice for half a day with 100 points. The speed of training there is twice that of here," Hao Xiao said. "Is there such a place?" Xiao Lingfeng said in surprise. "Where?" Hao Xiao pulled Xiao Lingfeng to the balcony, pointed to the circular dome building in the distance, and said. "Did you see that? That's where we took on the mission." "Thanks." Xiao Lingfeng nodded and said. "Then I'll go there and try practicing first." After saying that, Xiao Lingfeng ran away. Hao Xiao and the other 3 looked at each other, and Yi Yucheng said. "It seems that Xiao Lingfeng is a practicing madman, and he still wants to practice at this time." Xiao Lingfeng came to the outer courtyard disciple hall. There are 3 parts here, the mission area, the training area, and the trading area. The mission area is for disciples from the outer courtyard to receive tasks, and the trading area is for disciples to trade with each other. Of course, you can also choose to sell to Taixuan Sword Academy. Of course, Xiao Lingfeng has only one goal now, and that is the training area. Although his current disciple points are only over 400, he still wants to try this training room. After paying the points and walking into the training room, Xiao Lingfeng felt that the concentration of spiritual energy here had become much stronger. The training room is a small room of about 20 square meters, which is enough for the disciples to spread out their hands and feet. Okay, let's start practicing. Xiao Lingfeng didn't want to waste time and started to practice Tong My Fist. He has no cultivation techniques, only this one martial skill that can open up the meridians. Although Tong My Quan is a low-end martial art in Jinlan City, it is still extremely precious to Xiao Lingfeng from Xingshou village. Over and over again, the spiritual energy, driven by the boxing technique, impacted the sixth main meridian. The higher the concentration of spiritual energy, the greater the impact and the faster the cultivation speed. However, as a result, the load on Xiao Lingfeng's physical body was getting bigger and bigger. Chapter 23 Zi Xiaoling's Wooing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The training speed in the training room was extremely fast. In half a day, 2/5 of Xiao Lingfeng's sixth main meridian was opened. However, for him who has no practice skills, practicing for half a day is already the limit. If you want to enter the training room again, you can only wait for your physical body to recover. There are only more than 300 points left, so it's time to consider taking on the mission. Xiao Lingfeng thought in his heart. The spiritual energy in the training room gradually faded away, which meant that Xiao Lingfeng's training time had come. At this moment, it is already 12 o'clock in the middle of the night. Oh, I forgot the time again. Xiao Lingfeng knocked his head and said to himself. After leaving the practice area, Xiao Lingfeng rushed towards the dormitory. Back in the dormitory, Zhao Bai and the others were still chatting. After taking a hasty shower, Xiao Lingfeng went to bed. Early the next morning, Xiao Lingfeng was woken up by Hao Xiu. I brushed my teeth and washed my face, then went to have breakfast together before going to report. According to the information on the communication watch, everyone found their class. By analogy, the management model of Taixuan Sword Academy is probably equivalent to that of a university in the previous life, but without various departments. After arriving at the class with Zhao Bai and others, Xiao Lingfeng saw Zhang Xiaonan. She was also assigned to this class. After saying hello to Zhang Xiaonan, Xiao Lingfeng began to wait. Zhang Xiaonan came over, sat next to Xiao Lingfeng, and said, "Are you going to take on a few missions? Earn some points?" "Of course, yes." Xiao Lingfeng nodded and said, "Do you also want to take the mission?" "Of course. I went to the disciple hall of the outer courtyard yesterday. I saw a pretty good mission in the mission area. I was to kill a few small monsters in the refugee residential area outside." Zhang Xiaonan nodded and said, "Are you going? You can earn 100 points with just one level 3 slave monster head." "So much," Xiao Lingfeng said in surprise. "How many people do you want?" "The limit is 8 people." Zhang Xiaonan said. "There are 4 of us here including my roommate. Is it the same for you?" "Well, what are the cultivation levels of your roommates?" Xiao Lingfeng nodded and asked. "They are all in the 4th level of Tong My realm." Zhang Xiaonan flattened his mouth and said with a pout. It seemed that she was the only one in the entire dormitory who was in the 2nd level of Tong My realm, which made her feel very aggrieved. "Ling Feng, who is this beauty?" Zhao Bai patted Xiao Lingfeng on the shoulder and asked. "I'm from the same village, my name is Zhang Xiaonan." Xiao Lingfeng introduced each other to several people. "Little man, the 3 of them are my roommates, Zhao Bai, Yi Yucheng, and Hao Xiu." "Hello." Zhang Xiaonan said generously. "Hello." Several people nodded. "Did you hear what Ling Feng and I just said?" "Are you going?" Zhang Xiaonan asked. "If a beautiful woman invites you, you have to go even if it means mountains of swords and seas of fire." Hao Xiu chuckled and said. "Then it's settled, we'll go take over the mission soon." Zhang Xiaonan said happily. After saying that, Zhang Xiaonan returned to her roommate. "Hao Xiu, how many points do you need to practice a skill?" Xiao Lingfeng asked. "It depends on the grade. The lowest one costs 1,000 points, and the price of martial arts is about the same." Hao Xiu thought for a while and said. "Why, Ling Feng, do you want to change your practice now?" "No, I haven't practiced Kung Fu. If I just practice Tong My Fist now, I can survive, but it will put too much pressure on my body in the long run." Xiao Lingfeng shook his head and said. He discovered this shortcoming when he came out of the training room last night. After all, Tong Mai Quan is not a formal training method. Once the concentration of spiritual energy increases, the power of the spiritual energy impact becomes somewhat difficult for him to accept. Hao Xiao was stunned and said. How did you reach the 5th level of Tong Mai realm without any techniques? From the tone of your voice, do you all have some cultivation techniques? Xiao Lingfeng turned to look at Yi Yucheng and the others and said. Several people nodded, and then Hao Xiao said. Of course, doesn't your family have any martial arts passed down? No. Xiao Lingfeng was speechless for a while. He turned and glanced at Zhang Xiaonan. Zhang Xiaonan has the lowest cultivation level in their dormitory. Probably for this reason, the strongest person in Xingshou village is only at the 5th level of Tongmai realm. How can he have any skills? There is only one martial skill, and only members of the patrol can learn it. In this world, martial arts cannot be taught casually. Of course, the Tongmai fist that Xiao Lingfeng now masters is obviously not among them. In this first class, I just introduced Taixuan Sword Academy to everyone. In fact, practicing this kind of thing depends entirely on yourself. Taixuan Sword Academy only provides a platform. Every 5 days, there is a practice class. You can go or not. What? Surprised Xiao Lingfeng was that it was not anyone else but Zi Xiaoling who introduced them to various matters at Taixuan Sword Academy. Obviously, Zi Xiaoling came here just for the points. After introducing Taixuan Sword Academy, the disciples can leave. Under the surprised gaze of other disciples, Zi Xiaoling approached Xiao Lingfeng with a smile and asked. Junior brother Lingfeng, are you still used to it? Ah. Xiao Lingfeng nodded. Come with me and I'll take you somewhere. Zi Xiaoling said. Xiao Lingfeng glanced at Zhao Bai and others and found that they were looking at him and Zi Xiaoling with ambiguous expressions. Well, you go back first. Xiao Lingfeng said. No problem. Zhao Bai and the others left wisely. After that, Xiao Lingfeng left with Zi Xiaoling. After arriving at a deserted place, Zi Xiaoling stopped and turned around. Senior sister Xiaoling, do you have anything to do with me? Xiao Lingfeng asked. Zi Xiaoling took out a book of exercises from her arms, handed it to Xiao Lingfeng, blinked and said. I know you haven't practiced the technique. I asked my dad to get it last night. You must practice to the Taoist realm as soon as possible. Don't let me down. Xiao Lingfeng was stunned when he looked at the cultivation technique in Zi Xiaoling's hand and had not yet reacted. What? Stupid. Zi Xiaoling waved in front of Xiao Lingfeng and said. Sister Xiaoling, I don't know how to thank you for being so kind to me. Xiao Lingfeng said. Why are you thanking me? Senior sister told you quietly, don't let too many people know about your supernatural talent. After you reach the Taoist realm, you will become my father's disciple. Do you understand? Zi Xiaoling rolled her eyes and said. Understood. Xiao Lingfeng nodded and took the secret book of exercises. Zi Xiaoling was trying to win over him, but they had already given him some skills to practice, so how could he refuse? Well, remember, return this technique to me after you have finished practicing it. You must not show it to others. Zi Xiaoling warned. By the way, these Tongmai pills are yours too. In 2 months there will be a new disciple trial. If you want to stand out, you must have at least the 7th level of Tongmai realm. Don't neglect your training. Zi Xiaoling took out another jade bottle from her arms and handed it to Xiao Lingfeng. Chapter 24 Taking the Elixir. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On the way back to the dormitory, Xiao Lingfeng took out the Tongmai pill that Zi Xiaoling gave him and checked it. There are 5 meridians in it. The Tongmai pill is not cheap. 1 pill costs, points. Here are 25,000 points. At the same time, Xiao Lingfeng also took a look at the grade of the technique Zi Xiaoling gave him. The top grade Kung Fu, Moon Will Kung Fu. It can form a moon will in the Dantian to assist practice at all times. It can be said that these gifts from Zi Xiaoling are full of sincerity. Although Xiao Lingfeng didn't know the situation in the inner courtyard, based on Zi Xiaoling's attitude towards him, it was impossible for him to go to the other elders' sect. After putting all these things into his pocket, Xiao Lingfeng walked straight towards the Bingzhou dormitory building. Beep beep. At this time, Qiu Lingfeng's communication watch made a sound. Qiu Lingfeng raised his hand and found a message from Zhang Xiaonan. The content was probably to ask him if the matter had been handled well, and to ask him to go to the disciple hall of the outer courtyard after he had handled it. Obviously, Zhang Xiaonan came to him because of the mission. It's here. Qiu Lingfeng replied with a message, turned around and ran towards the outer courtyard disciple hall. When he arrived at the disciple hall of the outer courtyard, Zhang Xiaonan and others were waiting for him outside. Ling Feng, these three are my roommates, Yi Lian, Du Shui, and Xiao Yener. Zhang Xiaonan introduced. Yi Lian is a quiet-looking girl with good looks. Du Shui has short, dry hair, and she doesn't dress like a girl. If Qiu Lingfeng can tell, this girl looks pretty cool. There was nothing special about Xiao Yener. When Qiu Lingfeng looked at her, she also cast a curious look. I told you, Qiu Lingfeng. Zhang Xiaonan said to the three people again. Hao Xiu, have you seen the mission? Qiu Lingfeng turned to Hao Xiu and the others and asked. We are all waiting for you. Hao Xiu shrugged and said. Are you afraid that I will trick you? Zhang Xiaonan said. And there can't be any powerful monsters near Jinlan City. Ah. Qiu Lingfeng nodded. Then, the 8 people walked towards the mission area. There are many large screens here, which are densely packed with various tasks and corresponding rewards, from killing elite monsters and escorting important supplies to pruning flowers and plants, and rebuilding the buildings in Jinlan City. The types of tasks can be said to be diverse, and the difficulty is also high or low. The reward for going to the refugee area to kill monsters is pretty good. A 3rd level slave monster head can earn points, a 4th level slave points, and a 5th level slave points. The team can have up to 8 members, and 2 dormitories are just enough. The group of people accepted the mission in a grand manner. After filling in various information, they each received a token to use when leaving Taixuan Sword Academy and leaving Jinlan City. Ling Feng, when did you reach the 5th level of Tongmai realm again? Zhang Xiaonan just saw that when Qiu Lingfeng filled in the information, he wrote the 5th stage of Tongmai realm in the column of cultivation level, and he couldn't help but ask curiously. The breakthrough occurred yesterday morning. Qiu Lingfeng blinked and said. You really are a monster. Zhang Xiaonan sighed and said. How long has it been since you awakened as a warrior? Now you have become a 5th level warrior in the Tongmai realm. Then, Zhang Xiaonan smiled slightly and said. You have to protect me more from now on. What are you covering for? You are so powerful and you need me to cover you, Qiu Lingfeng said with a smile. What? Do you mean to say that I am fierce? Zhang Xiaonan frowned. No, absolutely not. Qiu Lingfeng quickly denied it. Everyone walked out of the disciple hall of the outer courtyard. The monsters outside Jinlan City don't dare to come out during the day. They only dare to come out at night. We just take advantage of this time to prepare. How about we meet under the dormitory building at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Yi Lian said. The sound is crisp and pleasant, as sweet as an oriole. Qiu Lingfeng and others naturally had no objections. Everyone returned to the Bingjiu dormitory building together, and then each returned to their own dormitories. Hey, do you think Yi Lian is interested in me? She looked at me several times just now. Hao Xiu covered her face and said with a smile. Look, you look like a monkey. Is it you that Yi Lian is looking at? It's obviously Yi Yuqing that people are looking at. Zhao Bai struck mercilessly. I have to say that Yi Yuqing is indeed good-looking and fair, and has the potential to be a pretty boy. Okay, you two, hurry up and pack your things. Qiu Lingfeng couldn't help but said. If I weren't prepared, I might have died. Hearing this, Hao Xiu and Zhao Bai stopped laughing. After returning to the dormitory together, we began to prepare various equipment. Qiu Lingfeng didn't have many things to prepare, but he still brought his backpack. There are many things in it that he brought from Xingshou village. After packing up the equipment, it was already past noon. Zhao Bai and others went to eat, while Qiu Lingfeng asked Hao Xiu and others to bring back a meal. Then, Qiu Lingfeng sat cross-legged on the bed and started the moon luck exercise that Zi Xiaoling gave him. Zi Xiaoling had given many instructions not to let others see this technique, and Xiao Lingfeng would certainly not forget it. Ding dong, the high-grade skill Moon Will Gong has been detected. Should the host spend devouring points to master it directly? System, how many swallowing points do I need to master Moon Will Gong? Xiao Lingfeng asked curiously. Ding dong, there are 3 levels of Moon Lung Kung. Mastering them all requires 900 devouring points. Mastering only the first level only requires 300 devouring points. The system gave a reply. Cough. Xiao Lingfeng couldn't help but cough slightly in embarrassment, not to mention 900 devouring points. Now I want to get 300 devouring points. It is a big challenge for Xiao Lingfeng. Sure enough, practicing directly won't work. Xiao Lingfeng thought and put away Moon Luck Gong. If he wanted to master this technique, he couldn't master it all at once. He could only practice it later when he was free. Then, Xiao Lingfeng took out a Tongmai pill. Although the technique takes time to practice, the Tongmai pill can improve your cultivation instantly. After opening his mouth and swallowing the Tongmai pill, Xiao Lingfeng felt a heat flow in his lower abdomen, traveling along his own meridians, washing his 6th main meridian over and over again. Although the main meridians were unblocked very quickly, Xiao Lingfeng did not feel any discomfort, but felt extremely comfortable. This is the benefit of elixirs. After a while, the power of a Tongmai pill was exhausted. Xiao Lingfeng's 6th main meridian has been opened. %. With one more piece, he can become a warrior at the 6th level of Tongmai realm. This Tongmai pill is really a good thing. Xiao Lingfeng felt excited. Then he took out a Tongmai pill again and drank it. Chapter 25 Refugee Residential Area. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With the second Tongmai pill in his stomach, Xiao Lingfeng's 6th main meridian was almost connected. However, there is still a slight difference. It's still a little bit off, but we're closer to a breakthrough. Xiao Lingfeng thought in his heart, the Tongmai pill is indeed a good thing. 2 pills saved him more than half a month of practice time in less than 10 minutes. At this time, Hao Xiao and others also came back. They also brought them back in packages. After everyone finished eating together, Yi Yuqing sent a message to everyone. What is recorded above is the appearance and level of various magical beasts that will appear in the refugee settlements outside Jinlan city. Everyone spent the next time digesting this information. After the time was almost up, Xiao Lingfeng and the others joined Zhang Xiaonan and the others. Then, the 8 of them walked towards the outside of Jinlan city together. Do you know what kind of monsters will appear outside the city? Xiao Lingfeng asked Zhang Xiaonan. Look, Yi Lian sent us a lot of information about Warcraft before, saying that it was sent to her by Yi Yuqing. While Zhang Xiaonan was speaking, he glanced at Yi Yuqing and said, By the way, Ling Feng, does Yi Yuqing from your dormitory have a girlfriend? I don't know about this, and I didn't ask. Xiao Lingfeng shrugged. Then ask for me. Don't think too much. I'm asking for a friend of mine. Zhang Xiaonan said. This friend you are talking about, is she? Xiao Lingfeng glanced at Zhang Xiaonan suspiciously. No, don't think too much. Zhang Xiaonan hurriedly denied it. Okay, I'll ask him now. Xiao Lingfeng nodded and was about to ask Yi Yuqing if he had a girlfriend. As a result, Zhang Xiaonan grabbed him and said in a panic. Are you stupid? Are you asking now? You can ask him again after we come back. Oh. Xiao Lingfeng's forehead darkened and he responded. By the way, Ling Feng, does senior sister Xiaoling have anything to do with you this morning? Zhang Xiaonan asked again. Oh, senior sister, she told me not to neglect my practice and enter the inner courtyard as soon as possible. Anyway, it's not a big deal. Xiao Lingfeng replied casually. Hey, do you think senior sister Xiaoling is interested in you? Why do I always feel that she is so good to you? Zhang Xiaonan asked curiously again. Puff. Xiao Lingfeng burst out after hearing the words and said. I said, what are you thinking? Have you forgotten that I have awakened my magical talent? Jia is also a genius. It is normal for senior sister Xiaoling to take care of me, and doesn't she always have that attitude towards everyone? Zhang Xiaonan thought for a while, nodded and said. Yes, senior sister Xiaoling gave me a boxing technique called Tong My Fist the night before yesterday and asked me to practice it well. Right, right. Senior sister Xiaoling is equivalent to a boy who spreads his wealth around. Don't think too much about it. Qiu Lingfeng echoed. Ah, sneeze, that at the same time, in the inner courtyard of Taixuan Sword Court, a girl suddenly sneezed. Taixuan Sword Academy is still some distance away from Jinlan City Gate. By the time a few people arrived at the city gate, it was almost 5 o'clock. After showing the token, everyone left the city together. Jinlan City has a total of 4 gates, southeast, northwest, and the refugee residential area is built around Jinlan City. Qiu Lingfeng and others are currently at the East City Gate, different from the prosperity in the city. The refugee settlements are proper shanty towns and slums, low, crowded buildings are densely packed together, and the streets are barely sanitary. There are occasionally a few brick houses, and these families are basically relatively wealthy. Several people were walking on the streets of the refugee residential area, and the costumes of Taixuan Sword Academy disciples caught the attention of the refugees here, especially several female disciples. The eyes of some male refugees gradually became burning. Why do I feel like they are going to eat them? Zhang Xiaonan leaned closer to Qiu Lingfeng and whispered. Don't worry, they don't dare to touch us. Qiu Lingfeng said. In front of them, an old man with a gray beard and a cane walked over surrounded by the crowd. Are these the disciples of Taixuan Sword Academy? The old man spoke slowly. The voice is very old, but full of vitality. Obviously, the old man is also a warrior. Yes, we are on a mission to hunt monsters. Qiu Lingfeng nodded and said. I am the leader of the refugee community in this area. Shall I take you to rest first? The old man opened his mouth. Qiu Lingfeng was about to agree, but Yi Yuqing stopped him and said. Old sir, we are not going to rest anymore. Please tell us about the places in this refugee residential area where monsters often appear, so that we can prepare in advance. With that said, Yi Yuqing took out a map, which was exactly the map of the refugee area given when he accepted the mission. The refugee was stunned for a long time, and then asked someone to bring a pen and draw a few circles on the map. Let's go quickly. Yi Yuqing said. With that said, he led everyone away quickly. Lao Yi, why did you do this? Hao Xiu frowned and said in confusion. In the refugee area, we also have to be careful about the refugees. They will do anything to get into Jinlan City. Yi Yuqing said seriously. Are you afraid that the homeless man has evil intentions? Qiu Lingfeng reacted and said. Yes, have you forgotten the crazy looks in the refugees' eyes when we entered the city? They don't dare to attack us openly, but what about in private? Yi Yuqing said. You know, most of the refugees in the refugee area have also been resentful of the people in Jinlan City for a long time. They hate the people in the city for not saving them and not letting them enter the city. Old Yi, are you too sensitive? I think the homeless leader just now was quite kind. Hao Xiu said. Lao Yi is right, it's better to be careful. Qiu Lingfeng nodded and said. The refugee area is very chaotic. Do you think a simple good man can sit in the position of the leader of the refugees? Then what do we do next? Zhang Xiaonan said in confusion. Go to the marked place, of course. Yi Yuqing said. There must be monsters in these places, otherwise if we don't kill them, they won't have the strength to kill them. What if there are no monsters? Du Shui asked puzzledly. Don't worry about that. Qiu Lingfeng took the words and said. Whether those people are harming us or not, these addresses cannot be fake. They can't leave those monsters alone. And if they want to harm us, they must choose a place with the most monsters. That's right, Yi Yuqing nodded. Chapter 26. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Outside Jinlan City, at the farm in the refugee residential area number 32, this is the lifeblood of this refugee residential area, and most of the refugees' food rations come from here. A portion of the crops produced will also be sold to Jinlan City in exchange for other daily necessities. There are also many refugees guarding here. After seeing Qiu Lingfeng and others, they came up to them. Are you disciples of Taixuan Sword Academy? A big man came over with a hoe and said warily. Yes. Xiaolingfeng nodded. That's great. 2 monsters appeared in the granary just now. Now we don't dare to go in. Can you go in and have a look? The big man pointed to the granary not far away and said. No problem. Hao Xiao naturally would not let go of this opportunity to be in the limelight and agreed immediately. You can take us there now, and we will help you guys deal with the monsters. Hao Xiao patted his chest and said. It is good. A group of refugees hurriedly led Xiaolingfeng and others to the granary. At this time, the door of the granary was still closed, but there was a strange chewing sound coming from inside. After Xiaolingfeng heard the sound, his nerves tensed up and he pulled out the dagger from his waist, kicked open the door. It was already evening, and the light in the granary was dim. 2 giant rats with red eyes and long tails, more than 2 meters long, were vaguely visible lying on the pile of food. Gnawing on it, after seeing Xiaolingfeng and others, the 2 giant rats screamed and rushed toward Xiaolingfeng and others. Get ready to meet the enemy, Xiaolingfeng shouted. However, before Xiaolingfeng and others could react, they felt a force coming from behind and kicked him into the granary. Not only was he like this, but others were also caught off guard and kicked into the granary. What? One of Hao Xiao's arms was bitten by the giant rat, and then it was torn off violently. An arm was directly broken off. Blood spurted, boom. The refugees seized the opportunity, ran into the granary in panic, and quickly closed the door. The granary was instantly dark, with only 2 pairs of scarlet eyes revealing some light. What? Du Shui and Xiao Yener screamed in fear. Frozen Sky Eyes. Xiaolingfeng had no time to get up from the ground and use his magical talent. Zhang Xiaonan took out the bright flashlight hanging on his right hand and shined it on the ceiling. The reflected light barely allowed everyone to regain their sight. At this moment, the 2 monster rats on the ground had turned into ice sculptures. One of the giant rats had a bloody severed arm in its mouth. These refugees want to harm us. Yi Yuqing gritted his teeth and said. Hao Xiao, are you okay? Zhao Bai pulled up the pale Hao Xiao and asked with concern. Little man, you have the lowest cultivation level and are responsible for taking care of Hao Xiao. Xiaolingfeng said, then took a step forward and attacked a giant rat. Click-at this time, the ice on the 2 giant rats dissolved and they regained their ability to move. At least 2 5th-level slaves. Xiaolingfeng's pupils shrank, and he had a preliminary understanding of the levels of the 2 monsters. Yi Yuqing, Zhao Bai, and Yi Lian followed closely behind, killing the other giant red-eyed rat. The reaction speed of the 2 red-eyed giant rats was extremely fast and their bodies were agile. They arrived in front of several people in the blink of an eye. The 2 red-eyed giant rats opened their mouths and bit at several people. Yi Yuqing and the 3 of them cooperated to deal with a red-eyed giant rat. Yi Yuqing and Zhao Bai were not weak at all, and they did not lose at all against the fast-moving red-eyed giant rat. Yi Lian was even more violent and incompatible with her appearance, causing injuries and leaving many bleeding wounds on the red-eyed giant rat. Xiaolingfeng did not have it so easy. Although the red-eyed giant rat could not bite him, the claws and tail of the red-eyed giant rat left many scars on his body. Continuing like this is not the way to go. We need to fight quickly. Xiaolingfeng thought to himself, glancing at the bright flashlight strapped to his right forearm. Before he had time to think about it, Xiaolingfeng pulled it out with his left hand, and then turned on the flashlight in the eyes of the giant red-eyed rat. The red-eyed giant rat obviously couldn't adapt to the bright light and immediately turned its head. Xiaolingfeng seized the opportunity and said silently in his heart. Mighty Claw. The strength of both arms tripled. Xiaolingfeng felt that his arm was full of power at this moment, and he stabbed hard at the head of the giant red-eyed rat. Puff. The dagger pierced directly into the head of the giant red-eyed rat, and scarlet blood flowed out. Death to me! Xiaolingfeng roared angrily and kicked the giant red-eyed rat hard on the neck. He directly overturned the red-eyed giant rat, and then Xiaolingfeng made a sliding shovel, and the dagger made a long gash in the belly of the red-eyed giant rat. The red-eyed giant rat's internal organs immediately flowed all over the floor, but even so, the red-eyed giant rat did not die immediately. Instead, it struggled to get up and bit Xiaolingfeng desperately. At this time, flashing the red-eyed giant rat with a flashlight has no effect. Xiaolingfeng threw the flashlight in his hand, held the dagger at the same time, and stabbed the red-eyed giant rat in the head again, puff. The red-eyed giant rat's head was opened again by Xiaolingfeng, and Xiaolingfeng's arm was also pulled out by the sharp teeth of the red-eyed giant rat with 2 bloody cuts. A burning pain surged into Xiaolingfeng's mind. The dagger in Xiaolingfeng's hand was stabbed into the head of the giant red-eyed rat one after another, and it was almost turned into a sieve. The red-eyed giant rat's teeth were also biting Xiaolingfeng's arm, refusing to let go. Finally, the body of the red-eyed giant rat crashed to the ground, lifeless. Xiaolingfeng's arm was also bloody. Du Shui and Xiao Yana ran over and struggled to open the mouth of the giant red-eyed rat. At this time, Xiaolingfeng's arm already had a wound that was as deep as the bone. In just a few blinks, blood filled the wound and flowed out. Ling Feng, are you okay? Du Shui asked. Go help Lao Yi and Zhao Bai quickly. Leave me alone, Xiaolingfeng roared. Ding dong, there is a dying monster nearby. Does the host choose to devour it? The system beeped. Swallow, Xiaolingfeng would not hesitate for a moment. Ding dong, the host is devouring the 5th level slave monster Dark Night Rat. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the magical talent, Night Vision. Congratulations to the host for his promotion to the 6th level of Tongmai Realm. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 50 devouring points. The system sounded a prompt. Xiaolingfeng glanced at the other giant red-eyed rat. Yi Yucheng and the others had already been able to fight the giant red-eyed rat with ease. After Du Shui and Xiao Yana joined, it was even easier. That red-eyed giant rat is almost dying. It wasn't until the red-eyed giant rat was completely dead that Xiaolingfeng breathed a sigh of relief. There was a feeling of soreness and swelling in his hands and head, which was the sequelae of using his magical talent. At the same time, Xiaolingfeng looked hard at the closed door. These refugees. I'll settle the accounts with them when I get out. Chapter 27 Repaying Resentment with Virtue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 2 monster corpses fell to the ground. Everyone then breathed a sigh of relief. Yi Yucheng and others hurriedly ran to Hao Xiu to check his injuries. At this time, Zhang Xiaonan had already treated Hao Xiu's wound and stopped the bleeding. Are you okay? Yi Lian walked to Xiaolingfeng and asked. Fortunately. Xiaolingfeng shook his head. Zhang Xiaonan ran over and started to bandage his arm. How is Hao Xiu? Xiaolingfeng asked. He has broken an arm. I'm afraid it will be difficult for him to stay in Taixuan Sword Academy any longer. Yi Lian said from the side. He can't stay in Taixuan Sword Academy. Xiaolingfeng's pupils shrank and he turned to look at Hao Xiu. Yesterday, Hao Xiucai was bragging to them and chatting about the future. Today, an arm was bitten off by a giant red-eyed rat, and he can no longer stay in the Taixuan Sword Courtyard. A Tongmai Realm warrior who has lost an arm can be said to have lost the qualification to advance to the Taoist realm. Most people only have enough spiritual energy to condense Tao seeds in the Dantian after. The 8 main meridians in the body are connected, and losing an arm also means that a main meridian is missing. You can imagine how difficult it is to condense the Tao seeds with the cultivation level of the 7th level of Tongmai Realm. These damn refugees, Xiaolingfeng couldn't help clenching his fists. They obviously came here to help the refugees kill the monsters, but these people repaid their kindness with hatred and wanted to kill them here. Don't exert any force, the wound will bleed again. Zhang Xiaonan frowned and said angrily. You don't have to be so angry. Yi Lian slowly opened his mouth and said. Everyone has his own destiny. Besides, it might be a good thing for Hao Xiu to leave Taixuan Sword Academy now. How to say? Xiaolingfeng looked at Yi Liandao. Yi Lian glanced at Xiaolingfeng, said nothing more, and walked to Yi Yucheng's side. Okay, get up too. Zhang Xiaonan bandaged Xiaolingfeng's arm, clapped his hands and said. Xiaolingfeng glanced at the bandage on his arm, which was bright red. What made him speechless the most was that Zhang Xiaonan tied his bandage with a bow. Hao Xiu, how are you? Xiaolingfeng walked over and looked at Hao Xiudao. At this time, Hao Xiu's face was bloodless, his forehead was covered with cold sweat, his right arm was empty, and the bleeding had stopped for the time being. I didn't expect that, Ling Feng, you still have magical talents. If it weren't for your magical talents, I would have died there. Hao Xiu showed her big white teeth and smiled at Xiaolingfeng. As soon as Hao Xiu said this, several others also looked at Xiaolingfeng. Xiaolingfeng killed a giant red-eyed rat by himself and was obviously much stronger than the others. You know, the other giant red-eyed rat was solved by everyone working together. Do you still have the heart to laugh at a time like this? Xiaolingfeng said speechlessly. Since Hao Xiu still has the strength to speak, it's probably not a big problem. Then, Xiaolingfeng glanced at everyone and said. The refugees outside are a big problem now. How are we going to get out soon? Beat. That must be unbeatable. One-on-one is fine, but if the refugees swarm us, Xiaolingfeng and these students can't stop him. We just have to leave quickly. Yi Yuqing shook his head. Leave directly. Don't you want to avenge Hao Xiu? Xiaolingfeng said in confusion. We can only go back and report it to the elder of the Outer Dean. If we resolve it privately, we will be sanctioned by Jinlan City. Yi Yuqing gritted his teeth and said. What kind of truth is this? They want to kill us, but we have to swallow our anger and run back. We came here to kill the monsters for them. Isn't it too much for these refugees to retaliate for kindness? Xiaolingfeng clenched his fists dissatisfiedly. Refugees are a vulnerable group. Yi Yuqing looked up at Xiaolingfeng's eyes and said word by word. Moreover, the actions of those refugees cannot represent the refugee group. What a vulnerable group! Can the vulnerable group bully others casually? Xiaolingfeng clenched his fist and said. Xiaolingfeng, calm down, now we have to hurry up and go back. Yi Lian said, Zhao Bai had already disposed of the corpses of the two monsters. It's strange. The essence of the monster you killed, Ling Feng, has almost dispersed. It's no longer much different from a wild beast. Zhao Bai held up the heads of two giant red-eyed rats and said in surprise. This may be because of my magical talent. This shouldn't affect the settlement of the mission, right? Xiaolingfeng said. It doesn't affect. Zhao Bai shook his head and then continued. By the way, Ling Feng, the monster you just killed still has a magic core in its body. With that said, Zhao Bai took out a magic core from his arms and handed it to Xiaolingfeng. The magic core of a 5th-level slave monster is worth, points each. This time you have paid it forward, Zhao Bai said excitedly. Ah. Xiaolingfeng glanced at the magic core in his hand and nodded. The chance of a magic core being born in a slave-level monster is extremely small, which also results in the price of the magic core being much higher than that of a monster. Let's all share the points from selling this magic core. Xiaolingfeng glanced at Hao Xiu and said, Du Shui and Xiao Yener's faces were filled with joy. 5,000 points were divided between 8 people. No matter how they were divided, they would still be able to get at least 500 points. After putting away the magic core, Xiaolingfeng turned to look at the door. The walls of the granary are made of stone, which is very hard and cannot be broken. The windows for ventilation are too high and not ideal. So the only exit is still this wooden door. Just when Xiaolingfeng was thinking about whether to force the door open, the door was opened. Several sweaty men ran in, looking panicked. Quick, hurry, save us. A monster appeared on the other side of the street and has killed several people. Hurry up and kill that monster. Several men spoke at the same time. How did you treat us before? Xiaolingfeng looked at those people with a cold expression and said. Let's go. Go back to Jinlan City. Xiaolingfeng said. Ling Feng, let's go there. Yi Yuqing said at this time. Why? Xiaolingfeng turned to look at Yi Yuqing. If we let it go, more refugees will die at the mouth of the monster. Everyone we can save will be killed. Yi Yuqing said. You want to repay kindness with evil? Then why repay kindness with kindness? These refugees want to kill us. Xiaolingfeng said. Ling Feng, you should go help them, there will always be innocent people. Hao Xiu spoke with difficulty. As soon as Hao Xiu opened his mouth, Xiaolingfeng was at a loss. All right. Xiaolingfeng agreed, then looked at the refugees and said. Where is the monster? Take us there quickly. Chapter 28 Coma. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A group of refugees led Xiao Lingfeng and others towards the place where the monster appeared. How Xiao was directly thrown onto Zhao Bai's back. On the street, you can see a terrifying red-eyed giant rat that is 2 or 3 times the size from a distance. It's much bigger than the red-eyed giant rat in the granary. There is no doubt that the level of this red-eyed giant rat is definitely higher than the 2 red-eyed giant rats just now. The red-eyed giant rat's mouth was full of blood, and there were many wounds on its body. Several refugees with cultivation skills surrounded the red-eyed giant rat. There were several ordinary people nearby who had been attacked by the red-eyed giant rat. One of them had his intestines flowing out from his abdomen and was dying. Ling Feng, this red-eyed giant rat is stronger, what should I do? Zhang Xiaonan looked at the giant red-eyed rat and said with a pale face. She used to feel disgusted when she saw a creature like a mouse, but now that there was such a big one in front of her, she felt disgusted and frightened. Of course we will cooperate with these refugees to kill the red-eyed giant rat. Xiao Lingfeng said. Zhang Xiaonan, take care of Hao Xiao here, and the others will come up with me. After saying that, Xiao Lingfeng drew out his dagger and rushed towards the battle circle. The others had no time to hesitate and followed him up. It has to be said that the cultivation levels of these refugee warriors in the refugee area are not low, at least they are at the 5th level of Tongmai realm, especially the refugee chief. With such an old body, he was no weaker than those young warriors. It shows how powerful he was when he was young. The head of this monster can be brought back to you for cross-examination, but the other parts must be left behind. The refugee chief said. To make up for our losses. No problem. Xiao Lingfeng nodded in agreement. Others were obviously dissatisfied with the refugee leader's conditions. However, Xiao Lingfeng agreed, so they couldn't say anything else. As Xiao Lingfeng and others joined the battle, Xiao Lingfeng felt that the warriors in the refugee area were gradually losing their strength. Even intentionally or unintentionally, they attracted the attacks of monsters and landed on Xiao Lingfeng and the others. These guys. Xiao Lingfeng felt annoyed. These people in the refugee area were really unreasonable. They were obviously here to help, but these refugees wanted to kill them. Is it to kill them and then pretend to be their identities and sneak into Jinlan city? Not all. I'm afraid they are just jealous that they, the Taixuan Sword Academy disciples, can enter Jinlan city and enjoy a safe and peaceful life. Although he was angry, Xiao Lingfeng couldn't get angry at this time. Frozen Sky Eyes. That a vertical gaze rose between his eyebrows, and then a cold light passed by. The giant red-eyed rat was immediately frozen. Immediately afterwards, attacks from a group of disciples fell on the red-eyed giant rat. These solid ice will only restrict the movement of the red-eyed giant rat, but will not hinder everyone's attacks. This is the magic of supernatural talents. While Xiao Lingfeng showed off this magical talent, a group of refugees in the refugee area also cast envious glances, and at the same time they were also a little jealous. He was not moved at all because Xiao Lingfeng and others fought against the monsters to protect them. In just a blink of an eye, the ice on the monster's body dissipated. Go back, Xiao Lingfeng shouted hurriedly. Everyone retreated one after another. The giant red-eyed rat looked at Xiao Lingfeng and rushed towards Xiao Lingfeng like crazy. It understands that Xiao Lingfeng poses the greatest threat to it. No, it wants to attack Ling Feng. Yi Yuqing's expression changed and he shouted. At this time, Xiao Lingfeng had just finished using his magical talent, and it was the time when he was weak. If attacked by a red-eyed giant rat, the consequences would be disastrous. But at this moment, a warrior from the refugee area appeared behind Xiao Lingfeng. Then, the warrior accidentally fell down. By accident, Xiao Lingfeng was pushed into the mouth of the giant red-eyed rat. Ling Feng. No! Yi Yuqing and others exclaimed and hurriedly ran towards Xiao Lingfeng. Mighty Claw. Xiao Lingfeng didn't expect that someone would push him at this time, but it was too late for him to dodge, so he had to bite the bullet and attack hard. Tongmai Fist. Xiao Lingfeng punched out, and the spiritual energy penetrated into his body along his pores, and punched out along his meridians. The 8th section of Tongmai Quan. It is also the only move in Tongmai Quan with actual attack power. Only this move can allow Xiao Lingfeng to temporarily have a spiritual attack similar to the spiritual attack of a strong man in the Taoist realm. The disadvantage of this move when used in attacks is also obvious. that is, it causes great damage to the meridians. The meridians of Tongmai realm warriors are not as strong as those of Daoling realm warriors. Xiao Lingfeng's spiritual energy flows slowly during practice, and after a long time, his meridians will feel swollen and painful. What's more, at this time, the spiritual energy entered his body almost instantly, circulated around in an instant, and burst out again in an instant. At the same time as he punched out, Xiao Lingfeng only felt the burning pain in his meridians, and it was too late to react. Bang! Xiao Lingfeng's punch hit the red-eyed giant rat firmly on the head. The cultivation level of the 6th stage of Tongmai realm is 3 times the power. 3,600 kilograms, plus a spiritual energy attack comparable to the spiritual attack of a powerful person in the Taoist realm. This punch directly penetrated the head of the giant red-eyed rat. The red-eyed giant rat opened a huge blood hole in an instant, and blood mist burst out. Xiao Lingfeng's right hand was also stained with blood, and his arm gradually dropped. Then, the body fell backward unconsciously. Using 2 magical talents in succession again was very draining on Xiao Lingfeng's spirit and body. Coupled with the terrifying spiritual energy impact of the 8th section of Tongmai Fist, it also caused great damage to his meridians. He was exhausted now. Before his body fell, Xiao Lingfeng felt that he fell on a soft and delicate body. Yi Yucheng and others ran over in panic. As for what he was shouting anxiously, Xiao Lingfeng couldn't hear clearly. Before losing consciousness, he shouted to the corpse of the giant red-eyed rat. Swallow. Then, he passed out. He just fell into a coma from exhaustion. I'm afraid using that frozen magical talent twice in a row will cause a lot of damage to him. After Yi Lian checked Xiao Lingfeng's condition in his arms, he breathed a sigh of relief and said. When Yi Lian's words came out, Yi Yucheng and others breathed a sigh of relief. What did you mean by pushing Ling Feng just now? Zhao Bai glared at the warrior who pushed Xiao Lingfeng just now and roared angrily. At the same time, he hit the warrior with red eyes. However, before Zhao Bai's fist fell, the refugee chief easily received Zhao Bai's attack. He didn't mean it, he just fell down. The refugee chief said lightly, while looking at Xiao Lingfeng with a hint of curiosity in his eyes. This kid is quite capable. Not only does he possess supernatural talents, he can even kill an 8th-level slave monster with 1 punch. Although the 8th-level slave monster is already at the end of its strength, it doesn't have much power left to fight, but it was still incredible to be killed by Xiao Lingfeng with such a punch. People can't help but lament that the waves behind push the waves ahead, and lament that the future generations are terrible at the same time. A little more jealous. Chapter 29 Return to Jinlan City. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Not on purpose, that when Zhao Bai heard this, his face turned red with anger. Anyway, no one is hurt now, so I can apologize, right? That the pushing warrior came out and said. Then he lowered his head and said. Sorry. Seeing the warrior's apologetic attitude, the disciples became even more angry. It was obvious that he pushed Xiao Lingfeng on purpose, but in the end it seemed as if he had been wronged a lot. Zhang Xiaonan was also biting his silver teeth and almost couldn't bear it anymore. However, she understood that the refugee chief could easily take Zhao Bai's attack, which proved that the refugee chief's cultivation level was very high. At least it's not something that disciples like them can afford to offend. Everything can only be discussed after returning to Taixuan Sword Academy. Let's take Ling Feng and Hao Xiu back first. Yi Yucheng squinted his eyes and exhaled. Let's settle this account slowly. Yi Yucheng gritted his teeth and said harshly. Well, take your time and figure it out. Yi Lian glanced at Yi Yucheng, nodded, and said. After these 2 people spoke, the others returned their focus to Xiao Lingfeng and Hao Xiu. As for the head of the giant red-eyed rat, it has been completely shattered, and I am afraid there is no way to receive the reward. As for the body, they definitely can't take it away. Even if they don't leave quickly, there's no telling what these refugees will do to them. The group of people left quickly. The refugee leader clasped his hands behind his back and watched the people leaving with squinted eyes. Chief of the refugees, this monster corpse, all its essence is gone. After a warrior inspected the body of the red-eyed giant rat, he reported. What? The essence is gone. The refugee chief's expression changed when he heard this. The preciousness of a World of Warcraft corpse lies in its transformed body, which was transformed by the aura of heaven and earth it absorbed during its lifetime. Leather can be used to make armor, bones can be used to make weapons, and even meat can assist in training after being eaten. Once it loses its essence, it is just an ordinary beast corpse. The corpse of an 8th level slave monster is not cheap, and can be sold for 100 million on the market, and this 100 million is just gone. I'm afraid it was the kid who did it just now. Naturally, the refugee chief thought of Xiaoling. However, soon, he shook his head again. He didn't think Xiaoling could do anything to him as an 8th level martial artist in Tongmai realm. I heard that some slave monsters will choose to use up all their cultivation when they die and launch a dying blow. I am afraid that it is for this reason that this corpse will become an ordinary beast corpse. The head of the refugees thought to himself. Cut this body up and divide it. The refugee chief spoke. After a group of disciples returned to Jinlan city, they rushed towards Taixuan Sword Academy. Zhao Bai was carrying Hao Xiu, and Yi Yuqing was carrying Xiaoling. The 4 girls followed closely behind. When they arrived at the medical room, a nurse began to treat Hao Xiu and Xiaoling's injuries. What everyone didn't expect was that Xiaoling's injury was far more serious than they imagined. From the outside, there was only a wound on the arm, but the meridians in the body were scarred by the impact of spiritual energy. Even with the subsidies from Taixuan Sword Academy, 1,000 disciple points are needed to cure the injuries on the meridians. Zhao Bai and the others scraped together, and finally collected enough points to give Xiaoling the medicine. As for Hao Xiu's situation, things were not going well. A broken arm basically meant the end of his career as a warrior. It's not that he can never practice again, but that he can only stay at the 7th level of Tongmai realm in this life. Although I have to leave Taixuan Sword Academy, at least I can stay in Jinlan city. After all, I am a 5th level warrior in the Tongmai realm. It shouldn't be a problem to make a living. Hao Xiu said with a carefree smile. I don't know whether to tell Zhao Bai and others, or to comfort myself. His cultivation level is not enough for the Dao spirit realm, and he is not a disciple of Taixuan Sword Academy who needs to perform tasks. Rather than staying in Jinlan city, it is better to say that he can only be trapped in this city. Cousin-in-law, why are you cousin-in-law? Zhang Xiaonan sat in front of Xiaoling's bed and murmured. At this time, Yi Lian and Yi Yuqing walked in. Where were you two just now? Du Shui looked at the 2 people and said. At this time, both Yi Lian and Yi Yuqing were breathing heavily, and Yi Lian's face was a little red. It's hard not to think too hard. It's nothing. Yi Lian shook his head and sat on one side. Yi Yuqing sighed, scratched his hair and sat next to Zhao Bai. Wow, Lao Yi, you caught up with Taipanhua so quickly, Zhao Bai said in surprise. I'm chasing you, you big-headed devil. Yi Yuqing rolled his eyes and said. She and I originally wanted to go out to do something, but it didn't work out. Zhao Bai glanced at Yi Lian, whose face was red, nodded, showed a smile, and said. I understand, Lao Yi, are you too impatient? Ling Feng is still in bed now. Go. Yi Yuqing knew that Zhao Bai was thinking wrong as soon as he saw Zhao Bai's obscene appearance. Xiao Yener came back with food for everyone. After eating, Yi Yuqing asked the girls to go back to the dormitory first. After Xiaoling wakes up, he will send them a message. The next morning, Xiaoling opened his eyes. Glancing around, I found myself in an unfamiliar environment. Yi Yuqing and Zhao Bai were resting on chairs not far away, and Hao Xiu was also lying on the bed, fast asleep. Came back. Xiaoling breathed a sigh of relief, lay on the pillow, and closed his eyes again. At this time, he was still very tired. This tiredness was at the mental level, and this was the sequelae brought about by using the Frozen Sky Eyes. Using the Frozen Sky Eyes and Giant Claws twice in a row was very taxing on his spirit and body. What's more, he finally performed the 8th section of Tongmai Fist. The spiritual energy directly impacted the meridians throughout his body. By the way, I remember that I seemed to swallow that monster in the end. Xiaoling vaguely remembered that he devoured the red-eyed giant rat before falling into coma, but he didn't know what the system would swallow up. Quickly bring up the properties panel. Host, Xiaoling Cultivation, 6th stage of Tongmai realm. Skills, None. Martial arts, Tongmai Fist, Supernatural Talents, Frozen Eyes, Giant Claws, Night Vision, Devour Points, 120. Fusion Opportunities, 0. The devouring point is 120. That should be devouring. Xiaolingfeng looked at the swallowing point in surprise and said. But why are there no new magical talents this time? Xiaolingfeng said puzzledly. Ding-dong, swallowing the same kind of monster will only enhance the corresponding magical talent. The system gave a reply. So it is. Xiaolingfeng nodded. When he devoured the 3 escape rats, he didn't get 3 magical talents. It was probably because of this reason. Chapter 30 Mastering the Kung Fu. You are listening at novelfull.audio. It seems that the best way to earn devouring points is to hunt monsters. Xiaolingfeng looked at the 120-point devouring point and thought to himself, and his 7th main meridian also penetrated 1/3, the few remaining Tongmai realm coins should allow his cultivation to break through to the 7th level of Tongmai realm. As for Yuelun Gong, Xiaolingfeng has no plans to practice it for the time being. Without any foundation in martial arts, it would be difficult for him to directly learn high-grade martial arts, so Xiaolingfeng has 2 choices, either learn a low-level skill first, or directly use the devouring point to master Moon Will Gong. By the way, doesn't the system also have techniques? Xiaolingfeng suddenly felt something in his heart and entered the system mall. Then, Xiaolingfeng chose the exercise column, the breathing and inhalation technique, 10 devouring points, a low-grade technique. Burning pulse technique, 100 devouring points, middle-grade technique. Ice mysterious technique, 500 devouring points, top-grade technique. Xiaolingfeng looked at the prices of these techniques and fell into silence. Good guy, the exercises are quite expensive. System, I bought the exercises from the system mall. Do I still need to use the devouring point to get started? Xiaolingfeng asked curiously. Ding-dong, the host can directly master the first level of the martial arts and martial arts purchased in the system mall, but subsequent upgrades can only be upgraded by adding devouring points. The system gave a reply. Xiaolingfeng already had an answer in his heart. Xiaolingfeng can practice the martial arts skills acquired in the outside world by himself or directly use the swallowing point to master them. However, although Xiaolingfeng can directly master the first level of the martial arts and martial arts purchased from the system mall, subsequent upgrades can only be upgraded through devouring points and cannot be upgraded through practice. From this point of view, although the exercises in the system mall are easy to obtain, they are also very restrictive. Forget it, now I need to quickly improve my strength, system, and purchase the technique Burning Pulse Ju. Xiaolingfeng thought for a while and finally said, Ding-dong, the host purchased the Burning Pulse art and mastered the complete Burning Pulse art. Didn't you agree to only master the first level? Why did you master the complete one? Xiaolingfeng listened to the system prompts without a moment of doubt, and then opened the information about Burning Pulse Ju, Kung Fu, Burning Pulse Technique, Grade, Middle Grade, Description 1, Absorb Spiritual Energy, Generate Meridian Fire in the meridians of the body, burn the impurities in the meridians, and can quickly penetrate the meridians. It is called the first magical skill in the meridians realm, but it is weak in subsequent realms. There is only one level of this technique, which is the chapter on opening up the meridians. Description 2, after entering the Taoist realm, you can use this technique to understand the middle-level martial arts, Xuanhua technique. Puff. Xiaolingfeng looked at the system prompts and felt that he had been tricked again. Good guy, he thought the system was so kind and gave him the complete technique. Unexpectedly, this technique only has one level, and only the Tongmai realm is the most useful, and it won't be of much use later. Generally speaking, middle-level skills are enough to reach the 6th realm of Taoism. Xiaolingfeng naturally thought that the same was true for this middle-grade technique, but he did not expect that this middle-grade technique did not follow an ordinary path and was only useful in the realm of Tongmai. However, the second effect of this technique is pretty good, and at least it gives me a mid-level martial skill. However, it can only be understood in the Taoist realm, which is also a high threshold. Only Taoist realm warriors have spiritual power in their bodies, while Tongmai realm warriors are only mortal bodies. They can only absorb spiritual energy to strengthen their bodies, but cannot use spiritual energy to breed spiritual power in their bodies. Xiaolingfeng got up from the hospital bed. Yi Yucheng and Zhao Bai didn't sleep deeply and woke up immediately after hearing the noise. After seeing the awakened Xiaoling Feng, both of them were happy. Yi Yucheng said, "Ling Feng, you finally woke up. How do you feel?" "Fortunately, except that my eyes are a little sleepy, there's nothing else." Xiaoling Feng shook his head and said, "How is Hao Xiu's situation?" "Hao Xiu is fine. It's just that he lost one of his hands. I'm afraid he won't be able to stay in Taixuan Sword Academy." Yi Yucheng glanced at Hao Xiu, who was still sleeping, and said, "Is that so?" Xiaoling Feng turned to look at Hao Xiu, feeling a little sorry. "I'll send a message to Xiao Lian and the others first, saying you're awake." Yi Yucheng said. "Xiao Lian." Xiaoling Feng raised his eyebrows and said, "Old Yi, can you catch up with Yi Lian so quickly?" No, you're overthinking." Yi Yucheng's forehead darkened and he said speechlessly, "I see." Xiaoling Feng nodded in agreement. "What do you know?" "You know." Yi Yucheng vomited blood in his heart. What did one or two people misunderstand? Yi Lian is his cousin, okay? By the way, Ling Feng, I failed to teach the refugee who harmed you yesterday. The refugee chief was too strong. Zhao Bai said with a guilty look. "It's okay. At worst, I won't go to that refugee area anymore and let them fend for themselves." Xiaoling Feng shook his head. "There is more than one refugee area near Jinlan City. Just don't go to that refugee area in the future. Also, Ling Feng, the monster you killed last night had its head smashed, and you can't receive the reward. That monster seems to be an 8th-level slave monster, which can be exchanged for 2,000 points. Zhao Bai said with a heartbroken look. "If you run out of points, you can earn them again, as long as you're fine." Xiaoling Feng shrugged and said, "After a while, Zhang Xiaonan and 4 others arrived here." After seeing the awakened Xiaoling Feng, Zhang Xiaonan was happy, then frowned and said reproachfully, "Ling Feng, you just woke up, why don't you lie down in bed and rest?" "I have nothing to do. I just slept early last night and it will be fine." Xiaoling Feng smiled and said, "Ling Feng, my little boy was worried about you last night. Why don't you lie down quickly? Otherwise, she will come back to the dormitory and start talking about it later, which will upset us." Du Shui said with a smile on her face. Zhang Xiaonan's face turned red and he said quickly, "Who talked about him?" "Du Shui, I warn you not to talk nonsense. You just woke up, so you should take a rest first. I'll ask the school doctor to come over and check your physical condition again. Your meridians were damaged last night." Yi Lian looked at Xiaoling Feng and said, "Okay." Seeing so many people asking him to lie on the bed, Xiaoling Feng could only nod and return to the bed. After a while, Yi Lian came back with the school doctor and nurse and checked Xiaoling Feng's body. He recovered very quickly. "Originally, I thought he would not wake up until at least tomorrow." The school doctor briefly checked Xiaoling Feng and said, "At this time, Hao Xiu was also woken up." After asking the nurse to change his medicine, the group left the infirmary. After returning to the dormitory, Xiaoling Feng washed up and then ran to the outer courtyard disciple hall. After selling the magic core, Xiaoling Feng returned the points that everyone had advanced last night, and then each person transferred another points. Then, Xiaoling Feng entered the primary training room. Sitting cross-legged on the ground, a Tongmai pill appeared in his hand. He swallowed it in one gulp, and then used the rich spiritual energy to practice the burning pulse technique.